Hello YouTube, this is Dakota from Bowtied Media, and today we've got a crazy big reviews roundup from albums and EPs that have been out from the year 2024 of June, July, and August. 3 months of music for me to sort of rate and give my opinions on here. So if you like listening to me yap about stuff for about, I think, 30 minutes, I don't know how long it's going to take, this is the video for you. Let's hop into it. First up, we've got Bleu, Clair's Inner Circle. I'm not exactly sure what Bleu, Clair was going for with this EP. Most of these tracks are silly and not in a fun way, with minimalistic tech/deep house production that feels like it was kind of thrown together haphazardly. I'll give this a Bowtied 4 out of 10. Then we got Charli xcx with BRAT. It's a BRAT summer baby, and BRAT even winter now, I guess, for me. But Charli has seemingly been around for a while now, but has yet to truly break out in a way like this. When you craft a project that defines a whole season, you know you've struck gold. Charli has brought hard-hitting, dense electronic beats to the forefront of pop music for the first time since the EDM bubble kind of popped in the mid-2010s. What truly makes this record special even is the kind of delicate balance of this like drug-infused raving and intimate storytelling. You could like literally be in like an intoxicated trance on one listen and starting a family on the next one. And it all depends on what you want to get out of the record and where you want it to go. So this is absolutely a fantastic record that I will score a Bowtied 9. Then we've got Zingara with The Code of Dreamz. Zingara's debut record is a nice collection of moody, thick dubstep production that feels quite weighty. This record is incredibly consistent in its quality and tone, almost to a fault, as I wished for a bit more variety here and there, but overall, it's a great debut. I'll give this a Bowtied 7. Then we've got Kasbo with The Learning of Urgency. Kasbo has officially foregone his chill wave and future-based production in favor of atmospheric progressive house. This record is beautiful and divine, but falls into many sort of tropes and cliches that plague the current house scene. I would very much like to see this be a sort of like one-off kind of trip to the world of house music for Kasbo, honestly. I'll give this a Bowtied 7. Then we've got Kaval with Cosmic Crash. I have really loved some of Kaval's projects in the past, but this one's not really it for me. Doesn't feel like a natural progression of his sound or maturity as a producer. I'll give this a Bowtied 5. Then we got KAYTRANADA with Timeless. I found this to be KAYTRANADA's weakest record yet, with a more kind of laid-back house and alternative R&B production. This record feels like it just kind of drag on and on and on. I'll give this a Bowtied 6. Then we got Synymata with Metamorphosis. Pretty much as generic gets when it comes to melodic dubstep. The production sounds like everything we've heard before, and the lyrics are nonsensical slop meant to tug at your heartstrings. This is a Bowtied 5. Then we got Jerro with Chromatic. Well, not trying to reinvent the wheel, Jerro puts together a solid progressive and melodic house record with a few highlights, but even fewer lowlights. I'll give this a Bowtied 7. Then we got Codeko with Reel Me In, a fine collection of tropical summer tunes on this quick EP here. I'll give this a Bowtied 6. Then we got YMIR with The Fae. YMIR takes us on a journey through a magical forest full of occult mysticism and a kind of forlorn cries of wild beasts. This is simply YMIR's best piece of music. Not only does he take us through this esoteric narrative, but each track has a different hit of heavy electronic production. Dubstep, drum and bass, mid-tempo, ambiance even. This project has it all. I'm giving this a Bowtied 9. Then we got Bensley, Justin Hawks, and Kumarion with Carry the Fire, a huge triple collab of premier drum and bass producers that end up with a pretty solid yet kind of underwhelming 4-track EP. Don't get me wrong, this is some solid drum and bass. I just maybe had an unjust expectations thinking that this was going to be the greatest D&B record to date. The linear song structure and by-the-books production are kind of what makes this just a good EP. I'll give this a Bowtied 7. Then we got Crywolf, Let Me Be Your Womb. Crywolf has changed things up again, and he continually proves he can do practically anything, taking a more art pop approach with sweeping ambient movements and grand operatic climaxes. Let Me Be Your Womb is a record about the sort of ever-changing tides of life and what or who stays consistent in that life of yours. Crywolf does it yet again with a great record, and I'll give this a Bowtied 8. We've got Tove and SG Lewis with Heat, a brilliant little collection of Eurodance tunes with an electro house flair to them. SG Lewis's production is masterful as always, and Tove really shines with simplistic and catchy lyricism. I'll give this a Bowtied 7. Then we got James Blake with CMYK 002. James has been really cooking on this EP, just cooking for himself. It's clear that this was a passion project that wasn't aimed for commercial appeal, because other than the brilliant first track, the rest of the cuts are an odd dose of reality into James's brain. I'll give this a Bowtied 5. Then we got Ace Aura with Eternal, a generally solid EP with crushing color-based elements and heavy dubstep production. Ace's sound is very refined on this project. I just prefer his more melodic side of things a little bit more than this one. I'll give this a Bowtied 6 though. Then we got Kygo with his self-titled album, Kygo. A mixture of unnecessary cover tracks and commercial slop makes for what is easily Kygo's worst project to date. He's very clearly become complacent, valuing streaming numbers over his own creativity. I'll give this a Bowtied 4. Then we got MYLK with Take a Byte. I absolutely adore the branding of this EP, but find the tracks to be relatively streamlined 8-bit sort of EDM fusion tracks. Each cut here is unique and brings something new to the table, but it all just feels a little dated to me. I'll give this a Bowtied 5. Then we got Whipped Cream with Is This Real? This project has all the makings of a really strong EP, just without most of its execution. I understand what Whipped Cream was going for, but the shorter tracks and odd feature choices and kind of cut short melodies, there just really isn't anything to really latch onto and deeply appreciate about this project. I'll give it a Bowtied 5. Then we got James Blake and Lil Yachty with Bad Cameo. This unexpected collab led to a pretty downer of a record in both its execution and tone. For a record that leans heavily into the art pop side of things, didn't really feel all that artistic. There's some great moments and long drawn out movements, yet I constantly feel like I'm being dragged along rather than hopefully expectant for what's coming next. I'll give this a Bowtied 6. Then we got Grabbitz in the Dark, a very pleasant, dark, and moody 3-track EP that is very much Grabbitz's sonic alley, right up that alley. It's a great expansion of his now signature style and tone, and I'll give this a Bowtied 7. We got Steve Aoki with Paragon. After a slew of uninteresting, drawn-out, senseless records, Steve Aoki is here with arguably his worst of all time. At 18 tracks and just behind the hour mark in length, this record is full of commercial garbage to the point that it's almost comedic, honestly. There is no sense of tonal cohesion, narrative flow, or even consistent production quality. The beats are drabs, and the features often offer next to nothing. Truly a new low for the cake, man. I'll give this a Bowtied 1. Then we got Petite Biscuit with Discipline. Petite Biscuit has gone full The Weeknd on this latest record, almost to the point that it feels disingenuous. From his vocal inflection to the song structure to the production elements, this album is meant to imitate the sound and feelings of listening to The Weeknd. And honestly, I don't mind the stylistic switch up. Abel doesn't have a monopoly on that sound, and I was actually quite excited to hear another artist kind of tackle that moody alternative R&B/synth pop fusion, but I still like this in the end. I'll give this a Bowtied 7. Then we got Spaghetti with The Big Boil. Rarely does a producer maintain a gimmick throughout a whole project without making it lose its luster. But my goodness, Spaghetti was cooking on this thing. Well, literally. The pasta-themed narratives, I think, are actually quite tasteful, pun intended, and don't distract from the heavy dubstep production that's behind it all. I'll give this a Bowtied 8. Then we got Fred V with Luminous, a fairly standard by-the-books liquid drum and bass record. If anything, this album has its consistency, though, having no real standouts, but also no real lowlights either. I'll give this a Bowtied 6. Then we got Death Pact with Cypher 3. Typically a fantastic producer, Death Pact has seemingly ignored what made him kind of stand out as a musician in favor of generic and unflattering rhythm. And the kind of flavor text he's added to this EP are narratively quite wayward, lost in an ethereal sense of misunderstanding. I'll give this a Bowtied 2. Then we got Eddie with Sleep Deprived, Eddie's best EP yet. A delicate balance of a moody atmosphere, drum and bass production, and a digital tone that kind of makes for a very pleasing listen. I'll give this a Bowtied 8. Then we got Milk Blood with Modular. At only 3 tracks and not on official streaming platforms, Milk Blood played around with a more intense, funky, and brooding electro sound. Despite the majority of these tracks being incomplete, the holistic EP here does feel like it's well put together. I would have been fascinated to hear what Milk Blood thinks a complete version of this project sounds like, because this might be some of their best work. I will give this a Bowtied 7. Then we got Misère with the Losers Club. If anything, this EP struggles with committing to one style and tone. There is a slew of various drum and bass styles mixed in with an overarching kind of pop-punk rock soundscape. And that's not that all these sounds don't work that well together. In fact, I've heard Misère execute this exact sound and balance to great success in the past. It just feels like this EP is like in an eternal state of limbo. Doesn't really go full swing into D&B, also doesn't fully commit into that punk side of things. Generation Gap is a fantastic melding of tones, but the other 3 tracks struggle to find that same balance. I'll give this a Bowtied 5. Then we've got Thirst with the After Hours mixtape. I will give credit to Thirst for not producing an exclusively funk mixtape by adding some house, downtempo, trap, and rap elements, as well as making the whole thing one continuous mix. But that being said, the individual tracks are short TikTok bait that really only explore one sonic element, if that. And yes, I also understand that funk is the kind of perfect genre for a mixtape like this, but I just don't see any reason to return to this record other than finding a kind of backing track for short-form content. This is Bowtied 5. Then we got Elohim with Power of Panic. After a career built on indie-tronica electro-pop production, Elohim has gone full-blown EDM with a predominantly mid-tempo sophomore record. The turn to this intense, dark EDM wasn't a stretch for Elohim, but not what I fully expected. The record is well-rounded and solid, but not Elohim's bread-and-butter style that I enjoy so much. I'll give this a Bowtied 7. Then we got Eminem with the death of Slim Shady coup de grace. This record has many tropes that Eminem has been falling into with his last couple of records, but is a better album than not. If anything, this album struggles with trying to do it all. It's got your horrorcore, comedy, conscious rap, and the sort of killing of Slim Shady yet again. Eminem has definitely recovered from his revival Kamikaze era, but it's far from his top form right now. This is a Bowtied 6. Then we got John Summit with Comfort in Chaos. John Summit's debut album was exactly what I expected. Safe. Sticking to his progressive and tech house production, Comfort in Chaos is a bit of a nostalgic record that feels like it would have been released in 2013. That being said, I don't feel like the tracks are dated or lack modern mixing. In fact, I think a majority of the track list here is quite excellent. It's a great album for someone like myself where it's kind of wrapped in nostalgia yet doesn't sacrifice quality for a more kind of classic house sound. I'll give this a Bowtied 7. Oh, goodness. We've got Jojo Siwa with Guilty Pleasure. You can be big enough to fail. You can. Jojo Siwa has shown the world that you can't just do whatever you want in a creative space like the music industry. First things first, the songs are just bad. The production is bland, the mixing is flat, the beats are basic, the vocals sound terrible, and the lyrics sound like they were written on the wall of an elementary school bathroom. There's nothing redeeming about these tracks. From a branding perspective, JoJo and whatever marketing team she has clearly is just out of touch with reality here. What demographic are we even trying to reach? This whole project just reeks of inaptitude all around. And I'm going to give this a Bowtied 0. Then we got Matt Zoe with Sign of the Times. Tackling a purely neurofunk EP, Matt Zoe brings forth an intensity and drive to a project that has yet to be seen, I think, to this level. The sound design throughout these tracks are pretty great, leaning into a violent sci-fi atmosphere with these kind of full eerie synths and supernatural folly. I'll give this a Bowtied 7. Then we got Sabai with North Star. Sabai's debut album started off really strong, but ended up falling by the wayside due to a lack of tonal variety, a distracting interlude, random whips, and a clear lack of experience in crafting a tracklist that flows. I do think there are some great moments and ideas spread throughout this record, but the cons sadly outweigh the pros here. If this album stopped at 9 tracks, I think it would have enjoyed it substantially more than I did, but Sabai felt the need to include 2 random kind of interlude outro tracks that have nothing to do, and they're whips that are heavily outdated. I don't get it. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Bowtied 4. And we got Salute with Pure Magic. As its name implies, this record is pure magic. Beautiful in energy, ecstatic in tone, and crisp in instrumentation. From top to bottom, this record is full of blissful summer vibes. Even the numerous vocal and production features across this project bring their own shining moments of playful beats and joyous melodies. And to top it all off, the turn towards a more speed-centric garage record did Salute wonders by keeping the kind of tracklist moving and the energy high throughout the whole thing. Giving this a Bowtied 8. Then we got Violet Pony with Girls Who Are Wizards. Classic EDM is back and in full force on this record. Brostrep with Skrillex samples, intense complextro, glitch hop, and festival progressive house tunes fill this 60-plus minute tracklist with the kind of foundational sounds of what inspired modern EDM. In a way, this album is a deep love letter to the sounds of the past. My only real gripe with this record is that it's doing a little bit too much. Individually, these tracks are quite fantastic, but as a holistic record, it's tonally very chaotic. But I will give this a Bowtied 8. Then we got Weathen with Life of a Wallflower Volume 2. What a weird, unfocused, sporadic, and disjointed record. I think a majority of the tracks here are at least decent, but man, there's just no rhyme or reason for anything here, really. I'll give this a Bowtied 5. Then we got Boombox Cartel with Proof of Life. After years of building a specific sound and style, Boombox Cartel has essentially thrown all of that out the window for an exhaustive, more commercially leaning debut album. This didn't sound like the record I had pictured in my head from the years of build-up. Many of the tracks here sound like some of his weakest trap yet, and the radio-friendly tracks were kind of nowhere close to his best stuff. I'll give this a Bowtied 6. Then we got Childish Gambino with Bando Stone and the New World. The supposed final Childish Gambino album is a mixed bag of ideas that didn't, for the most part, land that well for me. I constantly struggled to follow the narratives being thrown from one track to another with little tonal or narrative cohesion. I want to give this a Bowtied 5. Then we got Infect with Veggie Games. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just don't understand the appeal of this project whatsoever. Most of the tracks have the same core sound with little to differentiate themselves from one another. Even within the rhythm subgenre, I just find this project to lack much variety at all. I know this is not what you want to hear maybe, but yeah, this is a Bowtied 3. Then we got Murata with Primal Phantom. Murata continues his streak of senseless, meaningless bro step that he's been doing for years now. This is nothing new. Bowtied 4. Then we got Scro with Heart. In true mixtape fashion, this project has a lot of ups and downs. There are some strong, complex, and unique production elements all throughout, but equally as many odd and strange creative decisions. As a taster, though, for a larger project soon to come, this definitely got me excited. I'll give this a Bowtied 7. Then we got Snake Gang with Snake Gang EP Volume 1. A pretty decent hip house project with a decent amount of vibes, but not much else going for it. I'll give this a Bowtied 6. Then we got Rashand with Bloom, a nice triplet of melodic house tracks with a great atmosphere and chill vibes. I'm giving this one a Bowtied 6. Then we got Dactyl with Wave. Dactyl's strongest work yet. His balance of analog sound design and picturesque atmosphere is virtually untouchable. He's garnered a lot of publicity this year with his huge collaborations, but this EP might be his real shining moment of 2024. I'm gonna give this a Bowtied 9. Then we got Dubvision with Another World, a predominantly flat and uneventful record of festival house / future rave tracks that feel 10 years out of date. I don't think any of the tracks are egregiously bad, but they all sound like they're stuck in 2010, and that's not a good thing with this one. This is a Bowtied 5. Then we got Eddie with Onziker Craft Volume 1.5. Some solid mid-tempo from Eddie, but mainly within the realm of production we've already heard from him a bunch of times. And other than Pocket Knife, none of these tracks are above and beyond the regular mid-tempo standards of 2024. I'll give this a Bowtied 6. Then we got Empire of the Sun, Ask That God, a serviceable record that truly starts with its best material and ends with its worst, as if it was just a straight line of quality. The escapist soundscape and ethereal tone can only take you so far without it becoming a bore. Giving this a Bowtied 6. Then we got Ellis with Signals. Combining funk instrumentation and house production, Ellis scratches an itch in the EDM sphere that very few artists can for me. While this may be a shorter and more straightforward project than his debut, it's still all that brilliant, and I'll give this a Bowtied 8. Then we got ISOKNOCK with Forever. The biggest project of the year came in full force, yet left me wanting something more. This album isn't bad by any means, but underwhelming for how these two were poised to dominate 2024. This is very much your party anthem of a record and will be looked upon fondly, but this won't be the defining project for ISOKNOCK, I don't think. I'll give this a Bowtied 7. Then we got Daya with Dauntless Project Era Reversal. Daya's debut album was far from what we expected. After building a catalog of primarily melodic rhythm, Daya dives face first into a destructive, intense, mind-melting, tear-out almost rhythm-style album. A true era reversal. While there are some shining moments of this record, for me, most of it was overrun by underwhelming static rhythm. I'll give this a Bowtied 6. Then we got Griffin with Pulse. While this project is stronger than his last record, it still falls into many generic dance pop tropes. I do appreciate the smattering of features across this record, but I do feel that Griffin has lost some of his identity as a producer by having so many hands in the pot here. Still, a majority of the tracks here are commercially fine tunes with easily danceable beats. I'll give this a Bowtied 5. Then we got Hades with How to Kill a God. Hades' debut album stays very true to who she is, mixing in a kind of thrasher dubstep style with emo aesthetics and a touching ballad here and there. This is very much the debut album that Hades was aiming for and wanted to write. The sudden unveiling of emotional trauma paired with harsh synths is a back and forth that's not easily to pull off, but I do think Hades manages to do both quite well. I'll give this a Bowtied 7. Then we got Riot Ten with Feral. Yet another completely crass and annoying abrasive project from Riot Ten. I'll give the man some credit for staying true to his own form and style, but this just isn't all that pleasing to listen through at all. Bowtied 2. Then we got Whales with Computer Music. I really enjoyed the first 2 tracks, but they felt a little on the nose, kind of basic, while still keeping things fresh with a flurry of drops. But the last 2 tracks are potentially some of the weakest tracks Whales has to date. Overall, a very odd EP. I'll give this a Bowtied 5. Then we got Tynan with Good Music. Yet another 3-track EP from Tynan with 1 song I absolutely love and 2 others I couldn't really care much about. At least this man is consistent. Bowtied 6. Then we got Alan Walker with Neon Nights. Far from Alan Walker's best and far from his worst, he's riding this kind of middle ground for his debut Monster Cat EP. While he isn't quite going above and beyond to produce something extraordinary, he's still not completely phoning it in either. More than not, though, these tracks fall into generic tropes and commercial traps that hurt the project more than they help it. I'm giving this a Bowtied 5. Then we got Logic with Ultra 85, Logic's best record. Having retired from making hits, Logic has pulled a career 180 and has now chosen to forego those mega hits in favor of longer, personal, and conceptual tracks. I'm genuinely surprised Logic managed to make a narrative record with a storyline that not only has tracks throughout the entire record, but isn't annoying to listen through. Honestly, guys, this almost was a Bowtied 10, but it's going to be a 9. Then we got Cloud None with Bliss. I appreciate Cloud None giving us an EP that is very clear in its variety in style and tone throughout. It's almost like a little teaser of Cloud None's core sound up to this point in his career. Holistically though, this EP doesn't really have any standout tracks, nor does it have any bad ones. Bowtied 7. Then we got Feed Me with Feed Me's Vintage Rally Championship. Feed Me's best project maybe ever? For just under 30 minutes, Feed Me continually showcases his prowess as a producer and creative thinker. While we may have not this many major grand tracks on this EP that we sort of get from Feed Me now and then, every single track here is in its own way complex, well-crafted piece of electronic dance music, even bouncing around a slew of genres. This is peak Feed Me, and I'm going to give this a Bowtied 9. Then we got Nurko with United. After spending 20 minutes and 5 tracks on generic melodub production, Nurko shows some real signs of life with the final 2 tracks, yet it's quite obvious those 2 tracks are meant to be pushed down and away from the main singles. And honestly, it's a shame that Nurko feels this way about his non-commercial tracks, because they are very much his best piece of work right now. I will give this a Bowtied 6. Then we got Summer Was Fun with Cruise Cuts. After a decade-long hiatus of EPs, Summer Was Fun is back with a very underwhelming and short new project. Here's to hoping that this is him just getting back into the swing of things. Bowtied 5. Then we got Teddy Killers with Play Games. Teddy Killers is here to dominate yet another aggressive, heart-pounding neurofunk / drum and bass project. Each track is intense in its own right, while they individually maintain their own identities. Hard not to love what these guys are putting out right now. Bowtied 8. Then we got What So Not with Motions. What So Not has pieced together a new 4-track EP filled with features as they take on an entirely UK garage sound. That particular genre isn't completely new territory for them, but to hear a complete, well-packaged set of tracks sung to the tune of one of my favorite subgenres was a very blissful experience. This is a Bowtied 8. Then we got Myrn with the 4 Stages. If you're looking for a consistent, high-quality 4-track progressive house EP, well, today is your lucky day, because this perfectly explains what that is. Myrn doesn't get too wild, but he surely got into the rhythm with things here. Bowtied 7. Then we got Cod Dubs with Canal Street Crook. In-your-face, aggressive rhythm with a trap flair is the name of the game here with this one. It's unnecessarily boorish, though. And this is a Bowtied 3. Then we got Delta Heavy with Midnight Forever. While none of these tracks are inherently bad, the entire record is the same old song and dance from Delta Heavy, the ones that they have been producing for almost a decade now, just with a new kind of paint job. It's solid drum and bass with Delta Heavy's kind of signature drum pattern and synths, but nothing more. Bowtied 6. Then we got Magdalena Bay with Imaginal Disc. Absolute synth-pop bliss. The beats are infectious, the vocals are ethereal, and the instrumentation is elite. Potentially the most innovative and creative record in the pop space this side of the 2020s. And I'm going to give this a Bowtied 9. Then we got MPH with Refraction. MPH might truly be the newest wave of UK garage. Melding together the core sounds of garage with the heavier bassline elements of bass house, MPH has crafted a soundscape that is truly his own. The beats are infectious, the vocal chops are hooky as hell, and the whole tracklist has enough diversity to keep me continually coming back for more. This is a Bowtied 8. Then we got Muramasa with Curve 1. Muramasa continues to put out a new record that stays vaguely within his established R&B/house style. This time, though, we are very much getting this deep house two-step umbrella that he's producing within, which is a fairly good look. There are a spattering of creative ideas and unique melodies to be found throughout this record, but equally, if not more, just average production elements. Muramasa found the juices for a brilliant overall soundscape, but just had a tough time executing it. This is Bowtied 6. And we got Sabrina Carpenter with Short and Sweet. For a mainstream pop record, this has a lot going right for it. While there are some moments of weaker writing and unfinished ideas, a majority of this record is a pleasant, hits-filled album. I think now that Sabrina Carpenter has really broken into the limelight, it'll be her next project that really cements her career one way or another. This is merely just a stepping stone. This is Bowtied 7, though. Then we got Sophie Tucker with Bread. Sophie Tucker's Latin dance pop has always had its moments, but this record feels holistically empty. I'm all for tracks like these plaguing the charts, but they just need some more intricate care to them to actually do so. With how much the style of music has taken over the music industry right now in this last couple of years, Sophie Tucker needs to up their game to stay relevant with all the Latin pop out there. This is Bowtied 6. Then we got Gyrofield with These Heavens, one of Gyrofield's stronger EPs as of late. She's very much staying within her own established lane, a lane in which I find a lot of my favorite stuff actually resides. I'm digging this. Bowtied 7. Then we got Hall with Ruler. I mean, this is just kind of edgy Brittum that isn't anything new or special. If Brittum could Brittum any harder, there would be nothing left. Bowtied 5. Then we got Tycho with Infinite Health. Tycho's latest record is a safe one that plays around a strong sense of nostalgia. A mixture of progressive and melodic house elements and a synthwave aesthetic, Infinite Health keeps things very calm and collected. This is a Bowtied 7. And finally, we've got Valley with Water the Flowers, Pray for a Garden. This has got to be Valley's best, most complete work of music yet. Opting for a more subdued alt-pop style instead of targeting commercial success did the band wonders in terms of musical quality. Losing a band member may have actually sparked a brand new renaissance for Valley, and if you like kind of poppy stuff, I think you'll like Valley as well. This is Bowtied 8. Whew, okay, thanks for being with me through the whole time here. There's a lot of stuff to cover and a lot still to go, so I better get on it. So without any further ado, I'm Dakota from Bowtied Media, and I'll see you guys in another video.